On a Sunday afternoon at the end of May, a confidential meeting was convened in our living room for the Jewish insurance agents who, along with my father, were being located from the Metropolitan's Newark office under the auspices of Homestead 42. They all came with just their wives, having agreed it would be best to leave the children at home. Earlier in the afternoon, Sandy and I, joined by Selden Wishnow, had arranged the chairs for the meeting, including a set of bridge chairs we'd carried upstairs from the Wishnows. Afterward, Mrs. Wishnow drove the three of us to the Mayfair Theatre in Hillside, where we would catch a double feature and then be picked up by my father when the meeting was over. The other guests were Shepsy and Estelle Tershwell, who were only days from moving their family to Winnipeg, and Monroe Silverman, a distant cousin, who'd recently opened a law office in Irvington. Just above the haberdashery store owned by my father's older brother, Lenny, the uncle who supplied Sandy and me with new school clothes at cost, when my mother suggested, out of her enduring respect for everything that one is taught to respect, that Hyman Resnick, our local rabbi, should be invited to attend the meeting. Nobody else among the organizers who'd assembled in our kitchen the week before showed much enthusiasm for the idea, and after a deferential few minutes of discussion, during which my father said diplomatically what he always said diplomatically about Rabbi Resnick, "I like the man, like his wife. No doubt in my mind he does an excellent job, but he's really not very brilliant, you know." My mother's proposal was tabled. Even though, to the delight of a small child, these intimate friends of our family spoke in as wide and entertaining a range of voices as the characters on the Fred Allen show, and were each as distinctly different-looking as the comic strip figures in the evening paper, this was back when evolution's sly wit was still rampantly apparent, long before the youthful renovation of face and figure became a serious adult aspiration. They were very similar people at the core. They raised their families, budgeted their money, attended to their elderly parents, and cared for their modest homes alike. On most every public issue, thought alike. In political elections, voted alike. Rabbi Resnick presided over an unimposing yellow brick synagogue at the edge of the neighborhood where everyone showed up in their high holiday best for the 3 days each year of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur observances, but otherwise returned there for little else except when necessary to dutifully recite the daily prayer for the dead during the period prescribed. A rabbi was to officiate at weddings and funerals, to bar mitzvah their sons, to visit the ill in the hospital, and to console the bereft at the shiva. Beyond that, he did not play a role of any importance in their day-to-day lives, nor did any of them, including my respectful mother, expect him to, and not just because Resnick wasn't that brilliant. Their being Jews didn't issue from a rabbinate or the synagogue, or from their few formal religious practices, though over the years, largely for the sake of living parents who came once a week to visit and eat, several of the households, ours among them, were kosher. Their being Jews didn't even issue from on high. To be sure, each Friday at sundown, when my mother ritually and touchingly, with the devotional delicacy she'd absorbed as a child from watching her own mother, lit the Sabbath candles, she invoked the Almighty by his Hebrew title, but otherwise no one ever made mention of Adonai. These were Jews who needed no large terms of reference, no profession of faith or doctrinal creed in order to be Jews, and they certainly needed no other language. They had one, their native tongue, whose vernacular expressiveness they wielded effortlessly, and, whether at the card table or making a sales pitch, with the easygoing command of the indigenous population, neither was their being Jews a mishap or a misfortune or an achievement to be proud of. What they were was what they couldn't get rid of, what they couldn't even begin to want to get rid of. Their being Jews issued from their being themselves, as did their being American. It was, as it was, in the nature of things, as fundamental as having arteries and veins, and they never manifested the slightest desire to change or deny it, regardless of the consequences. I'd known these people all my life. The women were close and reliable friends who exchanged confidences and swapped recipes, who commiserated with one another on the phone and looked after one another's children and regularly celebrated one another's birthdays by traveling 12 miles to Manhattan to see a Broadway show. The men had not only worked for years in the same district office, but met to play pinochle on the 2 evenings a month the women had their mahjong game. And from time to time, on a Sunday morning, a group of them went off to the old sweat baths on Mercer Street, with their young sons in tow. The offspring of this set happened to all be boys, somewhere between Sandy's age and mine. On Decoration Day, the 4th of July, and Labor Day, the families would usually organize a picnic some 10 miles west of our neighborhood, at the bucolic South Mountain Reservation, where the fathers and sons tossed horseshoes and chose up sides for softball and listened to a ball game on somebody's static-ridden portable radio, the most magical technology known to our world. The boys weren't necessarily the best of friends, but we felt connected through our father's affiliation. Of us all, Selden was the least robust, least confident, and most painful for him, least lucky. And yet it was to Selden that I managed to contract myself for the remainder of boyhood and probably beyond. He'd begun to shadow me more doggedly since he and his mother had learned of their relocation, and I could only think that because we too were going to be the sole Jewish pupils in the Danville elementary school system, I'd expected by the Danville Gentiles no less than by our parents to be his natural I'd be expected by the Danville Gentiles no less than by our parents to be his natural ally and closest companion. Selden's omnipresence might not be the worst that was awaiting me in Kentucky, but to the imagination of a 9-year-old it registered as an unendurable ordeal that accelerated the urge to rebel. How? I didn't know yet. All I'd felt so far was the pre-mutinous roiling, and all I'd done about it was to find a small water-stained cardboard suitcase forgotten beneath the usable luggage in our cellar storage bin, and, after cleaning it of mildew inside and out, hidden the clothing there that I surreptitiously took piece by piece from Selden's room whenever my mother dragooned me into enduring an hour downstairs as a peevish student of chess. I would have taken my own clothes to stow away in the suitcase, except that I knew my mother would discover what was missing, and one day soon I'd have to come up with an explanation. She still did the wash on the weekends, and put the laundered clothes back as well as the dry cleaning that it was my job to collect from the tailor's shop on Saturdays. And so, mapped out in her head, was an inventory of everyone's wardrobe that was complete down to the location of the last pair of socks. On the other hand, stealing clothes from Selden was a snap, and, what with his having latched on to me as his other self, vengefully irresistible, underclothes and socks were easy enough to get out of the Wishnow apartment and down the cellar stairs to the suitcase tucked beneath my undershirt. Stealing and hiding a pair of his trousers, a sport shirt, a pair of his shoes posed a more difficult problem, but suffice it to say that Selden was distractible enough for the theft to be accomplished and for a time to go unnoticed. Once, having gathered together everything of his I needed, I couldn't have said what I planned to do next. He and I were about the same size, and on the afternoon when I dared to secrete myself in a bin and change out of my clothes and into Selden's, all I did was stand there and whisper, "Hello, my name is Selden Wishnow," and feel like a freak, not just because Selden had become such a freak to me, and I was being him, but because it was clear from all my transgressive sneaking around Newark, and culminating in this costume party in the dark cellar, that I had become a far bigger freak myself, a freak with a torso. The 1950 left from Alvin's 20 went into the suitcase under the clothes. I then hurriedly got back into my own clothes, shoved the cardboard suitcase beneath the other luggage, and before the angry ghost of Selden's father could strangle me to death with a hangman's rope, ran for the alleyway and the outdoors. Over the next few days, I was able to forget what I'd hidden and the unspecified purpose it was meant to serve. I could even count this latest little escapade as nothing seriously apparent and as harmless as following Christians with Earl, until the evening when my mother had to rush downstairs to sit and hold Mrs. Wishnow's hand and make her a cup of tea, and put her to bed, so wretched and distraught was Selden's overworked mother because of her son's inexplicably losing his clothes. Selden, meanwhile, was up in our flat, where he'd been sent to do his homework with me. He was plainly distraught himself. "I didn't lose them," he said through his tears. "How could I lose a pair of shoes? How could I lose a pair of pants?" "She'll get over it," I said. "No, not her. She doesn't get over anything." "You're going to send us to the poorhouse," she told me. "Everything but to my mother is the last straw." "Maybe you left them at gym class," I suggested. How could I? How could I get out of gym class without my clothes on?" "Selden, you had to leave them somewhere. Think." The next morning, before I headed for school, my mother left for work. She suggested me making a gift to Selden of a set of my own clothes to replace his that had disappeared. There's the shirt you never wear, the one from Uncle Lenny's that you say is too green, and the pair of Sandy's corduroy trousers, the brown ones, that never fit you right. I'm sure they would fit Selden just fine. Mrs. Wishnow was beside herself, and it would be such a thoughtful gesture on your part, she said. And underwear? Do you want me to give him my underwear, too? Should I take it off now, Ma? That's not necessary, she said, smiling to soothe my irritation. But the green shirt and the brown corduroys and maybe one of your old belts that you don't use. It's entirely up to you, but it would mean a lot to Mrs. Wishnow, and to Selden it would mean the world. Selden worships you, you know that. I immediately thought, she knows what I did, she knows everything. But I don't want him walking around in my clothes. I don't want him telling everyone in Kentucky, look at me, I'm wearing Roth's clothes. Why don't you worry about Kentucky when and if we go to Kentucky? He'll wear them to school here, Ma. What is the matter with you? She replied. What is going into you? You're turning into... So are you! And I ran off with my books to school. And when I got home for lunch at noon, I pulled from my bedroom closet the green shirt I hated and the brown corduroy pants that never fit, and brought them downstairs to Selden, who was in his kitchen, eating the sandwich his mother had left him and playing chess with himself. Here, I said, throwing the clothes on the table, I'm giving you these. And then I told him, for all the good it did in rerouting the direction of either of our lives, only stop following me around. And there we will pause.